Welcome to Healing Diabetes Foundations, Class 1, first session, the first video. I'm naturopathic Dr. Klein, and in this video I want to lay down the foundations, primarily the way you look at glucose when it comes to diabetes. Most people think of glucose as something dangerous, a poison of sorts, and it's not. And in fact, when I treat people I help, I don't put them on low-carb diets. On the contrary. So I'm going to share some studies and case studies with you to explain this idea. It's really important to help relearn the way we think of diabetes, reestablish it, change it, unlearn the old ways of thinking. So this comes from a study that looked at 13 subjects, diabetic subjects. And so I'm asked to ask questions. High carb diet improves glucose levels in diabetes? Yes, it does. So in fact, what happened here is that these 13 subjects were fed a regular diet, and then these are the blue bars, and then they were given a high carb, low fat diet. In fact, the high carb diet consisted of 90% of the caloric intake was from glucose. How crazy is that? Well, it's not really crazy, but that's how we're trained to think and believe. And in fact, most of the people, once they switch to the high carb diet, you can see the red bar is the blood sugar levels, and it dropped. The blood sugar levels under the high carb conditions dropped from most individuals. In 2 individuals, this dropped ever so slightly, and in 1 person, the glucose levels went up. When you come from the standard model of understanding and thinking of diabetes, you would expect everybody would respond this way. Everybody should have higher glucose levels on a high carb diet, and that's not what happened. And in fact, this can change. There's a way to change things around for these 3 individuals as well, and we'll get into that later on. And this is a table from another study, and you can see that on a high carb diet, a 75% carb diet, blood sugar levels dropped substantially within 2 weeks, and even more so over the long term. I don't remember exactly what the long term was. It was a few months. Can't remember exactly how many months, 2 or 3 or 4 months, but nonetheless, you can see that the trend is downwards even with a high carb diet. The good thing about using a high carb diet is that you're training yourself to take in glucose. And that's important, and I'll explain that in a moment. So it is a mistake to think that carbs cause diabetes. High glucose, which is our main carbohydrate in the blood, so high glucose in the blood is the effect of diabetes. It's not the cause of diabetes. You can have 2 people consuming the same amount of carbohydrates, and one develops diabetes and the other one doesn't. How come? It's not the carbs, right? If both consume the same amount of carbs, something else. We'll talk about that something else, or some things else. Anyways, low carb diets are dangerous. The benefits of a low carb diet last for up to a year on average. For some people less, for some people more. But then this is what happens. This is from Medical News Today. It's a publication, and in this particular article they write about a study, and in the study they found out that low carb diets are unsafe and should be avoided. Why? Because low carb consumers were 51% more likely to die from coronary heart disease, 50% more likely to die from cardiovascular disease, and 35% more likely to die from cancer. We don't want that. And that happened under low carb conditions. Why did it happen under low carb conditions? Because glucose, the stuff that grains like rice and starchy vegetables and fruit are made of, basically glucose is your cell's main source of energy. If you deprive your body and your cells from your main source of energy, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get sick. And so some people feel fantastic when they go on a low carb diet. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It happens, but not because you're depriving yourself of an important source of fuel. There are other reasons, and I'll get into that later on. But the key is basically to allow your cells to take in glucose efficiently. What's diabetes? It's a condition of high glucose levels where? In the cells? No, in the blood. Right? So I tried to illustrate it through this diagram. Human cell needs glucose for energy. Glucose comes through blood vessels. This is supposed to be a blood vessel. travels in the blood vessels into the cells, or tries to get into the cells. And if something blocks the glucose from entering the cells, then glucose remains in the blood, and that's where it is a problem. But if we can fix this and allow glucose to get into the cells, then it wouldn't be a problem anymore, right? And again, it's not the glucose, it's not the carbs, it's what's going on that is preventing it from getting into the cells. And so basically this is a typical explanation of, or a diagram that you find in biochemistry textbooks. This came from Encyclopedia Britannica. Just shows you that glucose and oxygen react together through a series of metabolic steps. This is the summary, but actually this summary covers a series of steps whereby glucose and oxygen react together to become transformed into carbon dioxide and water. The same amount of atoms in glucose and oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, they're all rearranged to form carbon dioxide and water. And through this process, energy is released, energy for your cells to function properly. And so the key is to restore good glucose uptake and metabolism. That's the key. And when I help people with type 2 diabetes, I focus on making sure they get the right kind of carbs at the right time. Okay, it's important to, yes, avoid processed foods and give yourself time in between meals to help your cells retrain themselves to uptake and metabolize glucose. There are other factors as well, but that's an important one. So this is an example of a person I helped, a woman in her 60s. I helped her recover from diabetes, and you can see this is actually a snapshot or a screenshot from a system that she used to track her food and also to report her blood sugar levels. So basically 3 months into this, 3 to 4 months, her glucose is normal, 5.3, within the norm. In American, this is a Canadian number, in American standards, milligrams per deciliter, you multiply it by 18, and then you get something like 94, 95 milligrams per deciliter. She started out at almost double that, so about 180 or so. In Canadian values was between 8.5 and 10 basically. And so you can see that she eats oranges and she eats pasta and rice and even a lemon meringue pie and potatoes, and yet her blood sugar levels dropped. And why? Because we restored her cell's ability to take in glucose. So if you'd like to know what are the types of foods that I recommend to consume, and that's just not just for diabetes, health in general, what are the sort of things I suggest you stay away from, and what sort of things maybe you should have in smaller amounts or with discernment based on your situation, then you can grab this color-coded food chart that I put together and I share with my clients. And if carbs or sugar, and really what I mean by that is glucose, is not the cause of diabetes, then what is the cause of diabetes, right? So really, and probably this is the takeaway from this video session, it's anything that blocks the cell's ability to take in glucose, or anything that would dump more glucose into the blood. It's more so the first thing than the second thing, but either one of these things. And so we're going to explore this in the next sessions.